I never expected my love of kayaking to put me at odds with the most notorious HOA president in Oakwood Springs. But life has a way of delivering unexpected confrontations. The first time I met Karren Wilcox, she was standing on my front lawn with a clipboard and a scowl that could curdle milk, informing me that my garden gnome collection violated Section 4.3 of the Oakwood Springs Homeowners Association bylaws. My name is Cole Oliver, and I'd moved to this upscale suburb of Portland, Maine, just 3 months ago. As a state trooper with 15 years of service, I'd saved enough to buy a modest 3-bedroom home in what the real estate agent had described as a quiet community with excellent schools and vigilant neighborhood oversight. That last part, I was quickly learning, was realtor speak for prepare for HOA harassment. "Mr. Oliver, your kayak is inappropriately stored on your property," Karren announced one Saturday morning in late April. I had been washing my bright blue kayak in my driveway, preparing for the season's first paddle on Sebago Lake. "Good morning to you too, Mrs. Wilcox," I replied, continuing to rinse the winter dust off my prized possession. The HOA guidelines state watercraft can be visible during cleaning and preparation, provided they're stored properly afterward. Karren's perfectly highlighted blonde hair barely moved as she shook her head. That's not the current interpretation. The board voted last week that all recreational equipment must remain out of sight at all times. I stood up, water dripping from my hands. I wasn't notified of any rule changes. "The email went out yesterday," she said with a dismissive wave. "You have 30 minutes to move it to your garage or backyard, or I'll be forced to issue a violation." I bit back my frustration. "I'll move it when I'm done cleaning it, which will be within your 30-minute timeline." Karren's 10-year-old son, Tyler, had been hovering nearby during our exchange, kicking at the pavement with obvious boredom. Now he approached my kayak with undisguised interest. "Cool kayak," he said, running his hand along the smooth hull. "Can I try it sometime?" Before I could answer, Karren yanked her son back by his shoulder. "Tyler, don't touch other people's things." To me, she added, "and please don't encourage him." I hadn't said a word, but I smiled at the boy. "It's no problem, kids should be curious about outdoor activities." Karren's lips formed a thin line. "We have a country club membership with proper instructors for appropriate activities. Come along, Tyler." As they walked away, I heard Tyler whining, "But Mom, I want a kayak like that one." "We'll talk about it later," Karren responded, her voice carrying that universal parental tone meaning absolutely not. I finished cleaning my kayak and properly stored it in my garage, knowing this wouldn't be the last of my HOA encounters. What I didn't realize was how quickly the situation would escalate. The following weekend brought perfect kayaking weather: 68 degrees, sunshine, and minimal wind. I loaded my kayak onto my SUV roof rack early in the morning, planning to spend the day at Sebago Lake. As I secured the final strap, I spotted Karren marching across the street, clipboard in hand as always, with Tyler trailing behind her. "Mr. Oliver, you know recreational vehicles cannot be visible from the street," she began without preamble. I checked my watch. "It's on my vehicle, not my property, and I'm leaving in 5 minutes. The guidelines permit loading and unloading." Karren's face reddened slightly. "The spirit of the rule, Mom, can I go with him?" Tyler interrupted, his eyes fixed on my kayak. "Please, I've been asking for a kayak forever." "Absolutely not," Karren snapped. Then to me, "Are you inviting children from the neighborhood to join you in unsupervised water activities?" I raised my eyebrows. "I did no such thing." "Your son expressed interest in kayaking, which is a healthy outdoor activity, but I never extended an invitation." Tyler's face crumpled. "But Mom, you promised we'd do something fun today, and all you're doing is walking around with your clipboard." Karren's expression hardened. "Tyler, we discussed this. We have tennis lessons at 11. "I hate tennis," Tyler shouted, stomping his foot. His next words were directed at me. "Can I please use your kayak just once around the lake?" That's enough, Karren grabbed her son's arm. Mr. Oliver is not taking you kayaking. It's dangerous and inappropriate. I stayed deliberately calm. Mrs. Wilcox, I never offered to take your son anywhere, but kayaking is perfectly safe with proper instruction and safety equipment. I want the kayak. Tyler was now in full tantrum mode, pointing at my kayak. You never let me do anything fun. Karren's face flushed with embarrassment as neighbors began to peek out their windows at the commotion. She lowered her voice to a threatening whisper. This is completely inappropriate. You're causing a disturbance in the neighborhood. I'm simply loading my kayak to leave, I replied evenly. The disturbance seems to be coming from elsewhere. Tyler made a sudden lunge toward my SUV. I'm taking it, I stepped between him and my vehicle. That's not going to happen, buddy. Karren yanked her phone from her pocket. That's it. I'm calling the police. You're threatening my child. I blinked in disbelief. Mrs. Wilcox, that's a serious allegation and completely false. I did not threaten anyone. You just prevented my son from moving freely. That's intimidation. Her fingers were already dialing 911. I sighed and reached for my wallet. Mrs. Wilcox, before you, hello, police. Karren was already speaking into the phone. I need to report a man threatening my child and attempting to lure him to a lake. We're at 47 Maple Avenue in Oakwood Springs. The suspect is loading a kayak and has been making inappropriate offers to my 10-year-old son. My jaw dropped at the blatant lies. I could hear the dispatcher asking questions on the other end. His name is Cole Oliver. He lives at 52 Maple Avenue, Karren continued, shooting me a triumphant look. Please hurry, I don't feel safe. She hung up and folded her arms across her chest. The police will sort this out. I leaned against my SUV and waited, a strange calm settling over me. Yes, they certainly will. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled into the street and Officer Ray Thompson stepped out. I knew Ray well. We'd worked together before I transferred to the state police. Morning, Cole. Ray nodded to me, then turned to Karren. Madam, I understand you called about a disturbance. Karren looked between Ray and me, confusion dawning on her face. You know each other? Yes, madam, Ray replied. Trooper Oliver and I have worked together for years. He's with the Maine State Police. The color drained from Karren's face. Trooper. I finally pulled out my badge and ID. State Trooper Cole Oliver, madam. I was trying to show you this before you called 911 with false allegations. Tyler's eyes widened. You're a police officer. That's so cool. Karren grabbed her son's shoulders. This is ridiculous. He was still threatening my son. Ray looked at me questioningly. I shook my head. I prevented her son from climbing onto my vehicle to take my kayak after he demanded to use it. At no point did I threaten anyone or invite any child to join me anywhere. He's lying, Karren insisted. He offered to take Tyler kayaking without my permission. Actually, Mom, he didn't, Tyler said quietly. I just asked if I could use his kayak and he said no. Karren's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Officer Thompson took out his notepad. Madam, making a false report to emergency services is a serious offense. So is making false accusations against a law enforcement officer. I didn't know he was a police officer, Karren protested. That doesn't make false allegations acceptable, Ray replied evenly. Now, I'd like to get statements from everyone involved. What followed was 20 minutes of Karren attempting to backtrack, Tyler honestly recounting what happened, and me providing a straightforward account of the interaction. Several neighbors, drawn by the commotion, confirmed my version of events. Mrs. Wilcox, Officer Thompson finally said, I'm issuing you a warning for misuse of emergency services. Any further false reports will result in charges. Do you understand? Karren nodded stiffly, her face a mask of humiliation and anger. And Mr. Oliver, Ray continued, keeping things professional, you're free to go about your day. As Ray returned to his patrol car, Karren hissed at me, this isn't over. The HOA board will hear about this. I secured the final strap on my kayak. I look forward to discussing it at the next meeting. Have a nice day, Mrs. Wilcox. I spent the day on Sebago Lake, paddling through the clear water and trying to put the morning's confrontation behind me. But as I loaded my kayak back onto my SUV that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karren Wilcox wasn't done making my life difficult. Sure enough, when I returned home, a bright orange violation notice was taped to my front door. According to the citation, my garden hose was improperly coiled and my mailbox non-regulation black instead of approved forest green. The violations carried a combined fine of $150. I photographed the notice and the supposedly offending items, then sent an email to the HOA board requesting the specific bylaw references for these violations. I received no response, but the next morning, another orange notice appeared, citing my aggressive demeanor toward HOA officials as a violation of the community standards. Over the next 2 weeks, the notices continued to appear for increasingly trivial infractions. My grass was half an inch too tall, my trash can was visible from the street for 15 minutes after collection, my porch light was too bright. Each carried a fine, and each was signed by Karren Wilcox, HOA president. I documented everything, paid none of the fines, and requested a formal hearing with the full HOA board. The response came in the form of a certified letter notifying me that a lien would be placed on my property if the now $850 in accumulated fines weren't paid within 30 days. It was time to take more direct action. The monthly HOA meeting was scheduled for the first Thursday in May at the Oakwood Springs Community Center. I arrived early, dressed in civilian clothes but with my badge and ID in my pocket. About 30 homeowners were present, sitting in neat rows of folding chairs facing a table where Karren and 4 other board members sat shuffling papers. Karren glanced up as I entered, her expression souring. She leaned over to whisper something to Richard Evans, the HOA treasurer, who looked in my direction and frowned. The meeting began with standard business approval of previous minutes, financial reports, and committee updates. When Karren finally opened the floor for homeowner comments, I raised my hand. "The chair recognizes Cole Oliver," Karren said with obvious reluctance. I stood, holding a folder of documentation. "Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to address the 17 violation notices I've received in the past 2 weeks, totaling $850 in fines." Murmurs rippled through the room. 17 violations in 2 weeks was excessive even by Oakwood Springs standards. "Mr. Oliver," Karren replied, "violation appeals must be submitted in writing to the board for review." "I've done that," I responded. 3 times I've received no response." I held up my copies of the emails. "I'm addressing it publicly because I believe these violations constitute targeted harassment following an incident on April 27th. Karren's face flushed. "That's ridiculous. The violations are legitimate." I opened my folder. The first violation cites my garden hose as improperly coiled. Section 7.2 of the bylaws states only that garden equipment must be stored out of sight when not in use. It says nothing about proper coiling techniques. A few chuckles came from the audience. The second violation claims my mailbox is non-regulation black instead of forest green. However, Section 3.4 specifically lists black as an approved color for mailboxes. Richard Evans cleared his throat. Perhaps there was a misinterpretation of the guidelines. 17 misinterpretations in 2 weeks, I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Including a violation for aggressive demeanor, which isn't mentioned anywhere in the bylaws." More murmurs from the homeowners. I continued through each violation, pointing out either the absence of supporting bylaws or direct contradictions to the written rules. With each example, Karren's face grew redder, and the other board members looked increasingly uncomfortable. "In conclusion," I said, "I believe these violations constitute harassment in retaliation for the incident on April 27th when Mrs. Wilcox called the police to report me for threatening her son, a false report for which she received a warning from the responding officer. The room erupted in whispers and surprised glances. Karren slammed her gavel. "That's enough. This is not the appropriate forum for personal attacks." An older gentleman in the back raised his hand. "I'd like to know more about this police incident." "It was a misunderstanding," Karren said quickly. "We've moved past it." "A misunderstanding that resulted in 17 retaliatory violations," I countered. "Mrs. Wilcox, you called 911 and falsely accused me of threatening your child and attempting to lure him to a lake. When the responding officer, who happened to be my colleague, arrived, you discovered I'm a state trooper. Since then, you've used your position as HOA president to harass me through these fabricated violations." The room fell silent. I pulled out my badge and ID. "For the record, I am State Trooper Cole Oliver. I have documented all of these violations, my appeals, and the original incident. I'm requesting that all fines be dismissed and that the board implement a review process for violations to prevent this kind of targeted harassment in the future." One of the board members, a woman named Patricia Miller, spoke up. "Karren, did you really call the police on Mr. Oliver?" Karren's knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the table. "He was attempting to involve my son in unsupervised water activities. Any mother would be concerned." "That's not true," came a small voice from the back of the room. All heads turned to see Tyler Wilcox standing in the doorway. Karren's husband Michael stood behind him, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Tyler," Karren gasped. "What are you doing here? Michael, why did you bring him?" Michael Wilcox stepped forward. "He overheard me telling my sister about the HOA meeting and insisted on coming. He says he has something important to say." Karren shook her head frantically. "This is inappropriate. Children aren't allowed at board meetings." "Actually," Richard Evans interjected, consulting the bylaws, "there's no rule against it. And given the serious nature of these allegations, I think we should hear what Tyler has to say." Karren looked betrayed as Tyler walked to the front of the room. "Mr. Oliver never invited me to go kayaking," the boy said clearly. "I saw his kayak and asked if I could use it because Mom promised we'd do something fun that day, but then just did HOA stuff instead. When he said no, I got mad and tried to take it, and he stopped me. That's all that happened. He never threatened me." The room was silent as Tyler returned to his father's side. "Thank you for your honesty, Tyler," Patricia Miller said. She turned to Karren. "It appears we need to discuss this matter in executive session. I move that all fines against Mr. Oliver be suspended pending review." "Seconded," said another board member quickly. Despite Karren's protests, the motion passed, and the meeting moved on to other business. As the meeting adjourned, several homeowners approached me to share their own stories of excessive or questionable violations. "She's been getting worse over the past year," confided Martha Jenkins, who lived 2 doors down from me. "Ever since she got re-elected as president, it's like she thinks she's running a dictatorship instead of a homeowners association." "Has anyone challenged her leadership?" I asked. Martha shook her head. "Elections are in July, but no one wants to run against her. She makes life miserable for anyone who opposes her." I thanked Martha for the information and headed for the exit. Karren was waiting by the door, her arms folded tightly across her chest. "You humiliated me in front of the entire neighborhood," she hissed. "You did that yourself when you filed a false police report and then abused your position for personal revenge," I replied calmly. "I could have you removed from the board for this," I added. "Filing false police reports is a crime, so is harassment." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "This neighborhood runs smoothly because I enforce the rules. Before me, people were painting houses whatever colors they wanted, installing unapproved fencing, leaving toys all over their yards. It was chaos. There's a difference between enforcing reasonable rules and tyranny," I pointed out. "The HOA exists to maintain property values and community standards, not to give you power over your neighbors." Karren's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this, Mr. Oliver, one way or another." I maintained eye contact. "Is that a threat, Mrs. Wilcox?" "Because threatening a law enforcement officer is also a crime." She stepped back, composing herself. "It's a promise that the rules will be enforced, uniformly and without exception." As I drove home, I considered what Martha had said about the upcoming elections. Perhaps it was time for new leadership in the Oakwood Springs HOA. The next morning, I woke to find my SUV's tires slashed, all four of them. The responding officer, not Ray this time but a younger patrolman named Steve Jenkins, took photos and my statement. "Any idea who might have done this?" Officer Jenkins asked. I hesitated. "I had a confrontation with the HOA president yesterday. She wasn't happy with the outcome." Officer Jenkins raised his eyebrows. "Karren Wilcox, my mom lives in this neighborhood. She's mentioned having issues with her. Your mother is Martha Jenkins." "She spoke to me yesterday," he nodded. "Small world. Look, I can't say Mrs. Wilcox did this without evidence, but we'll check if any neighbors have security cameras that might have caught something." After he left, I called a tow truck and had my SUV taken to a garage for new tires. I also ordered a security camera system for my property. That evening, as I was installing the doorbell camera, Karen's husband Michael approached my house. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid of being seen. "Mr. Oliver," he said quietly, "I wanted to apologize for what's been happening. Karren, she gets fixated on things sometimes." I stepped down from my ladder. "Your apology is appreciated, but it doesn't fix my slashed tires." Michael's eyes widened. "Slashed tires?" "Karren, wouldn't I mean, she can be overzealous about rules, but she wouldn't damage property." "Someone did," I replied. "And it happened right after she told me I'd regret standing up to her at the HOA meeting." Michael ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Listen, Karren was up all night after that meeting. She was on the phone with board members, checking bylaws, writing emails. She never left the house." "Can you be sure of that? Did you check on her throughout the night?" He looked away. "I slept in the guest room. We haven't been getting along great lately. But I didn't hear her leave, and our alarm system would have recorded if any doors opened." I nodded, considering this information. "Fair enough, but someone has a vendetta against me, and it started with Karen's false police report." "I know, and I'm sorry about that. Tyler told me what really happened. Karren tends to embellish things when she feels threatened." He sighed. "Look, she's under a lot of pressure. Her interior design business is struggling, and the HOA presidency gives her a sense of control." "That doesn't excuse harassment or filing false police reports," I pointed out. "No, it doesn't," Michael agreed. "I've tried talking to her, but she won't listen to me. Maybe she needs to face some consequences to realize she's gone too far." I studied him carefully. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing specific, just that I won't stand in the way if you decide to pursue this legally." He glanced at his watch. "I should go. Karren will be wondering where I am." As he walked away, I pondered our conversation. Was Michael genuinely concerned about his wife's behavior, or was he trying to distance himself from her actions? And if Karren hadn't slashed my tires, who had? The next few days passed without incident. My security cameras were fully installed. The HOA board had officially dismissed all my fines, and I was preparing for a weekend kayaking trip with some friends from the state police. Then Friday afternoon, I returned home to find Karren standing on my porch, clipboard in hand, examining my newly installed security cameras. "These cameras are not approved modifications to the home exterior," she announced as I approached. Section 5.7 clearly states that all exterior modifications must receive prior board approval. I unlocked my door. Security cameras are exempt under Section 2.3, which prioritizes safety measures over aesthetic considerations. Karen's eyes narrowed. "You've been studying the bylaws." "I have indeed," I confirmed. "Would you like to come in and discuss this further, or would you prefer to issue another violation that will be overturned?" After a moment's hesitation, she followed me inside. I left the door open partly for propriety, partly because I didn't trust her not to claim I had trapped her if the door closed. "Mrs. Wilcox, I think it's time we reached an understanding," I said, setting my keys on the counter. "The targeted harassment needs to stop." "I'm simply enforcing the rules," she insisted, though with less conviction than before. "No, you're selectively interpreting rules to target me because I embarrassed you. It's unprofessional and potentially illegal." She clutched her clipboard tighter. "Are you threatening legal action against the HOA?" "Not against the HOA," I clarified. "Against you personally for harassment and filing a false police report. The other board members seem reasonable. They've already dismissed your vindictive fines." Karren's composure slipped slightly. "You have no proof of harassment. I have 17 violations in 2 weeks, all signed by you, most contradicting the actual bylaws. I have your son's testimony about the false police report. I have witnesses to your threat at the HOA meeting." I leaned against my counter. "What I don't have is evidence that you slashed my tires, though the timing is suspicious." "I did not touch your tires," Karren exclaimed, genuine shock in her voice. "That's a ridiculous accusation." "Then we have a problem because someone did," I replied. "And it happened right after our confrontation." Karren seemed genuinely perplexed. "Well, it wasn't me. I would never damage property that would reduce neighborhood property values." Despite myself, I smiled at her reasoning. "At least we agree on something." She hesitated, then asked, "Have you reported it to the police?" "Of course. Officer Jenkins took the report." "Martha Jenkins's son?" Karren asked, her face paling slightly. I nodded. "He mentioned his mother lives in the neighborhood." Karren set her clipboard down and sank into a chair at my kitchen table. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked defeated rather than combative. "Everyone hates me, don't they?" she asked quietly. I wasn't prepared for the vulnerability in her voice. "I don't think hate is the right word. But your approach to HOA leadership has created resentment." "I'm just trying to maintain standards," she insisted, though the fire had gone from her voice. "When we moved here 5 years ago, the neighborhood was declining. Houses needed painting, lawns were overgrown, children's toys were scattered everywhere. The previous board was too lenient." "There's a middle ground between lenient and oppressive," I pointed out. Karren was silent for a moment. "Michael says the same thing. He thinks I've gone too far." "Have you considered that he might be right?" She looked up sharply. "You spoke to Michael." "He came by to apologize for your behavior," I confirmed. "He seems concerned about you." Karren's face flushed. "He has no right to apologize for me, and I don't need his concern. I need him to support me instead of undermining my authority." Her reaction was revealing. This wasn't just about HOA rules, it was about control and perhaps about problems in her marriage. "Mrs. Wilcox," I said carefully, "I'm not interested in getting involved in your personal life. I just want the harassment to stop. Can we agree to a fresh start?" She gathered herself, straightening her posture. "I suppose we could reset our professional relationship." "Good. No more targeted violations, and I won't pursue the false police report matter." Karren nodded stiffly, then reached for her clipboard. "I should go. Tyler will be home from school soon." As she stood to leave, my phone rang. I checked the caller ID. It was Ray Thompson. "Excuse me, I need to take this," I said to Karren, who hovered uncertainly by the door. "Hey Ray, what's up?" "Cole, we got a hit on your tire slashing case," Ray said. "A neighbor across the street has a security camera that caught someone approaching your vehicle at 2:17 a.m. the night of the incident. The footage isn't great, but it looks like a teenage male." I glanced at Karren, who was pretending not to listen. "Any identification possible?" "Not from the video alone, but the neighbor thinks it might be Jason Fitzgerald. He's had trouble with vandalism before, and apparently his mother is on the HOA board with Karren Wilcox." The pieces clicked into place. Victoria Fitzgerald's son, the family on Elm Street with the contemporary glass house. That's the one. Victoria and Karren are apparently close friends. The neighbor mentioned there was some drama at a recent HOA meeting involving you and Karren. I looked directly at Karren. Yes, there was. Thanks for the update, Ray. I'll follow up later. As I hung up, Karren shifted uncomfortably. Was that about your tires? It was, I confirmed. They have video footage of Jason Fitzgerald vandalizing my vehicle. He's Victoria's son, your friend on the board. Karren's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, confusion, then dawning realization. Victoria was very angry after the HOA meeting. She felt you had humiliated the entire board. So her son decided to slash my tires as revenge. Karren shook her head. I had no idea, I swear. Victoria and I did talk that night. I called her after the meeting, upset about what happened, but I never suggested anyone should damage your property. I believed her. Karren was many things, but her reaction to the tire slashing seemed genuinely shocked. Well, now the police have evidence, and Jason will likely face vandalism charges, I said. His mother's friendship with you won't help his case. Karren looked genuinely distressed. Jason's already on probation for spray painting the school gym last year. This could send him to juvenile detention. Actions have consequences, I replied. Especially repeated criminal actions, she nodded slowly. Yes, they do. After a pause, she added, including mine. I may have overreacted to the incident with Tyler and afterward. It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get from Karren Wilcox. Well, now we have a chance to handle things differently going forward, I offered. Karren gathered herself. Yes, well, I should go call Victoria. She needs to know what's happening. After she left, I called Ray back to discuss next steps in the vandalism case. Jason Fitzgerald was brought in for questioning that evening and confessed to slashing my tires after overhearing his mother and Karren discussing the HOA meeting confrontation. He claimed he wanted to teach the new guy a lesson about respecting the HOA. Though he insisted neither his mother nor Karren had suggested the vandalism. Given Jason's prior record and the deliberate nature of the crime, he was charged with criminal mischief and violation of his probation. Victoria Fitzgerald was mortified and immediately offered to pay for the damage to my vehicle. The following week brought another HOA meeting. I attended, prepared for tension, but was surprised to find Karren subdued. She conducted the meeting efficiently but without her usual combative edge. When it came time for new business, she cleared her throat. Before we proceed, I would like to propose a review of our violation procedures, she announced. Recent events have highlighted potential issues with our current system. I suggest forming a committee to create a more transparent process, including a requirement for photographic evidence of violations and a neutral review of all fines before they are issued. Murmurs of surprise and approval rippled through the room. Patricia Miller quickly seconded the motion and it passed unanimously. After the meeting, Karren approached me. Mr. Oliver, I've been thinking about our conversation. You were right about finding middle ground. Maintaining standards doesn't have to mean being oppressive. I nodded. That's a healthy perspective. Victoria resigned from the board, she added. After what happened with Jason, she felt it was appropriate. She's focusing on helping him fulfill his community service requirements and getting counseling. That's good to hear, I said. Sometimes difficult situations lead to necessary changes. Karren hesitated, then added, the board elections are next month. I've decided not to run for president again. 5 years is enough. It's time for new leadership. I was genuinely surprised. That's a significant decision. Michael thinks it's for the best, she said, and so do I. The HOA was taking over my life and I was losing perspective on what really matters. She glanced across the room where Tyler was chatting animatedly with another boy. Like spending time with my son instead of obsessing over garden hoses and mailbox colors. The transformation seemed remarkable, though I wondered how lasting it would be. Well, I wish you all the best with whatever comes next. She smiled a genuine smile, perhaps the first I'd seen from her. Thank you, and I'm sorry about everything that happened, especially the false police report. Apology accepted, I said. Fresh start, Karren nodded. Fresh start. In the months that followed, the Oakwood Springs HOA underwent significant changes. Patricia Miller was elected president and implemented the new violation procedures Karren had proposed. Violations decreased by over 60%, while voluntary compliance with community standards actually improved. Karren focused on reviving her interior design business and, somewhat surprisingly, became an advocate for transparency in HOA governance. She even started a blog about HOA reform, finding the balance between standards and community. As for me, I continued to enjoy my kayaking weekends without HOA interference. The following spring, I even organized a community kayaking day at Sebago Lake with proper instruction and safety equipment for interested residents. Karren Wilcox was among the first to sign up with both his parents' permission. Karren watched nervously from the shore as her son paddled around the cove in a beginner's kayak, but she managed not to intervene. "He's doing great," I told her. "Natural ability," she nodded, relaxing slightly. "He's been begging for a kayak of his own since last year. We're considering it for his birthday." "That's wonderful," I said. "The water's a great place for kids to learn independence and respect for nature." Karren smiled ruefully. Lessons I could have used myself, apparently. "Michael says I'm making progress, though. We all have room for growth," I offered diplomatically. As I headed back to the water to help another beginner, Karren called after me. "Officer Oliver, thank you not just for teaching Tyler, but for everything. Sometimes we need someone to stand up to us when we've gone too far." I nodded my acknowledgement. The incident that had begun with a confrontation over a kayak had led to unexpected changes in our community. Karren was right. Sometimes we need someone to stand up to us when we've gone too far, whether that's an overzealous HOA president or a teenage vandal. In my years as a state trooper, I'd learned that most people aren't irredeemably bad. They're just caught in patterns of behavior they don't know how to break. Karren Wilcox had been trapped in such a pattern, using HOA rules as a way to exert control when other aspects of her life felt chaotic. The Oakwood Springs community was healthier now, with reasonable rule enforcement balanced by respect for homeowners' autonomy. Property values remained strong, lawns were still well maintained, and houses were appropriately painted, but without the atmosphere of fear and resentment that had pervaded the neighborhood before. As I watched Tyler paddle confidently around the lake, I reflected that sometimes the most effective law enforcement happens not through confrontation, but through transformation, helping people find a better way forward rather than simply punishing past mistakes. And sometimes, that transformation begins with something as simple as a blue kayak and the courage to stand up to a clipboard-wielding HOA president who doesn't yet realize she's talking to a state trooper.